without further ado, it's a real pleasure to have Craig Elliott join us tonight. Craig is a current CEO and co-founder of Pertino. And Craig brings like a pretty long history of pretty cool tech-related work. We're going to sort of talk a little bit more about that. But to give you the brief what's what on Craig, he's been sort of around technology for about 30 years.
Started when I was 8.
Yeah, 8 years old. Started working for Apple at 9. They pulled him out of his mom's arms, moved him to California. Spent a few years at Apple, and then did his own, or got recruited to
Packeteer
right
employee
after that.
number 3.
Employee number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Took some time off.
After that. Mm-hmm.
And now he's on to a new startup. So that's the short bio on Craig, but we'll let him tell it better. So Craig, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Iowa. In fact, in a town of about 500 people. I was telling somebody else this story that the first building I worked at Apple had more people than my hometown. So, so that was a pretty interesting transition to get used to. Freeways and all those kind of things. Traffic jams where I grew up were basically around combines as opposed to freeway traffic in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. So family, you have brothers, sisters?
Got one sister who lives in Chandler, Arizona, and so that's about it. Mm-hmm.
Cool. What did your parents do in a 500-person town?
My father, we've been networking communications people for many generations. My dad owned an independent telephone company. So he had all of the local loop for a county basically in Iowa. And then as things started to get more complicated over time, they went from mechanical switches where you dial the number, and in the office it would literally go tick, 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 tick in an XY fashion to connect the wires together. And then we switched over to digital connectivity. So we put in a Northern Telecom switch. And then ultimately he was the ISP, cable TV provider, everything that had to do with a wire or a signal into the house. So that's what I did growing up, that, and worked on the neighbor's farm.
All right. So entrepreneurial for life, right?
There you go. And my grandpa had it before him. So, and he went from these phones to these phones. And my dad went from these phones to push buttons and things. So,
all right.
Lots of wires.
So I guess you didn't go to college in your hometown?
No, but close to my hometown. I went to Iowa State University. In a typical fashion for a networking communications CEO, I got a degree in animal science and microbiology. So that's what I studied. I was going to be a veterinarian. Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Well, this story, Jason's heard it 1,000 times, but it's a pretty good story, actually. So I just finished my undergraduate degree and had absolutely no money at all left. And so I had to figure out a way. I got accepted to vet school and had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I deferred for a year. And in that period of time, always been the computer guy within the animal science department. I wrote a lot of software. This was Apple IIs and even Apple IIIs at that point. And so the local computer place said, come work for us, you'll make more money, work for us for a year, and then you can go back to school. And so I did, and that was the year the Macintosh came out. And so I sold more Macintoshes than anybody in the United States that year. I was 23. And so I got a letter from Steve Jobs, said, come to dinner in California. So that was my first trip to California, I think my second trip on an airplane. And I flew to California and had dinner with Steve, and I spent a week meeting with all the executives at Apple, and they were basically saying, how in God's name did you sell so many computers in this little town in Iowa? And so I told them the story about that. And then about 3 months later, well, first of all, Steve gave me a Porsche, which was kind of cool. And so I took the Porsche home and back to Iowa. I was probably 3 Porsches in all of Iowa, which was kind of neat. And about 3 months later, they called back and said, do you want to work in California? And so I thought, I got my microscope in one hand, and I'm going, I'll give it a try, see what happens. And I spent 10 years there. From 85 to 96, I was at Apple.
All right.
It's a good start.
That's a good start, I'd say.
But I still got the microscope, just in case. this whole computer thing's a fad, I can always go back to microbiology.
Do you still have the Porsche?
Swapped it for a little bit better one, actually.
All right, all right. So, what did you do at Apple? How do you go from a veterinarian to working at Apple?
Well, I kind of looked at the opportunities in veterinary medicine at Apple, and I decided to go a different direction. So I was like the technical stuff, and so this was the time when desktop publishing was really big. So everybody at Apple wanted to go work on desktop publishing, and I thought, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of competition there, and it's going to be hard to figure out. And there was another group called Desktop Communications, all about networking communications, which was just in its infancy. This is pre-internet. This was Novell networks, 3Com networks, all sorts of stuff, proprietary protocols, still had SNA from IBM and DECnet and everything else. And I said, why don't I go over there? Maybe I can figure that bit out. And that's where I started. So I started working on networking communication products in '85 and had a whole series of products I was product manager for. And then through my career at Apple, ultimately was international GM for internet and online services for Apple. So always networking stuff. That was always the thing I really liked.
Can you tell us any cool stories about Steve Jobs?
You know, honestly, I had dinner with Steve. I didn't really have that much interaction because if you do the dates, he left shortly after I started, which I don't think I had anything to do with that. I think it was more Scully. But the night it was kind of interesting. The night I had dinner with Steve, we were at this nice restaurant in Menlo Park, and he's asking me all these questions. And one of the questions he said was like, he goes, now how many because I know you're the top sales guy, but how many Macintoshes did you sell? And I told him it was like, I can't remember exactly, it was like 100 or 125 or something. And Steve, in his typical Steve fashion, was, that's pathetic. I can't believe it, blah, blah. And he just starts ripping me to shreds. And I'm like 22, 3 years old going, oh my God, you know, I'm dead. I just will go crawl back to Iowa now. And then finally I just looked at him and said, Steve, I'm your best guy. And he went, you're right. And we had this great dinner and he started talking to me. But I kind of pushed back on him a little bit, and that's all it took. And then he was fine. But I thought I was dead there for a while. So, but remembering this was a Macintosh that had no hard drive, no external drive, and about 5 pieces of software. So I thought I did all right.
All right. So at what point did you start to consider being an entrepreneur?
Well, I think you kind of pointed out my grandpa and my dad both had their own companies, and I always kind of thought that's where I'd end up. But this opportunity at Apple was phenomenal. I mean, I got to travel the world and do all this crazy stuff. I mean, the standing joke at Apple in 1985, 86, 87, when I was there, was what's the difference between Apple Computer and the Boy Scouts? And the answer is the Boy Scouts have adult supervision, because the average age at Apple is 26 years old. And I had a signature authority when I got there for $50,000. My net worth wasn't $50,000. It was a very interesting place. So I stayed there for 10 years, which was longer than I probably thought I really would, but it was just a phenomenal place to learn and learn business and everything else. So I took advantage of that. But Apple also had a sabbatical program. So they had a generous vacation plan, but every 5 years you got 6 weeks off, paid vacation, plus your vacation. So the first time I saved up 6 weeks of vacation, plus another 6 weeks of sabbatical. You got 2 weeks off at Christmas. I took 3 months off, traveled the world with a backpack. And then at the next time was 10 years, I got another 6 weeks off. At that point I went, I think I might kind of look around a little bit and see what the opportunities are. Apple actually quit doing the sabbatical program because everybody was using that period of time to go out and check out new jobs, which wasn't their intent. But so that was when I had an opportunity. I'd spent a lot of time. I was international GM for this division, and so I was traveling all over the place, and Telecom New Zealand had offered me an expat job. And I thought, oh, this will be cool. We can go down. We got no kids, and my wife and I were just going to go down for 2 years and hang out in New Zealand. And at the same time, while I still had this time off, I'd actually signed the letter to go to New Zealand, and we were figuring out, how to sell the furniture and everything else and sort out what we're going to do. I got asked to help a couple engineers work on a business plan. And it was a common friend of ours that we worked together with at Apple had said, oh, Craig can help you in the business plan. And typical Silicon Valley thing, guy called me up, and I said, yeah, throw me some shares of stock, and I'll help you write your business plan. No big deal. I'll spend 3 or 4 days on it. We'll sort it out. And that was Bob Packer and Brett Galloway, the other 2 guys I founded Packeteer with. And so anyway, I got looking at this, the basic technology that they'd started to work on and write up, and we redid the business plan and spun it around in a little bit of a different direction. And the guys who were the intended investors, they hadn't exactly written the checks yet. The guys who were going to invest in this company to start the company up looked at it and got really excited, and they said, how about if you come work for us? I was like, well, I got this thing in New Zealand. And they said, you can be CEO. And I went, okay, haven't been CEO before. We'll give that a go. So I had to call the New Zealand guys back up, say, not coming. And the closing line, which I thought was interesting, from Steve Campbell, who was one of the guys who was going to be the investor, so we rounded up. He says, if Packeteer works out, you could retire to New Zealand, which I actually did later. So that's how we fired up Packeteer, 3 of us, and we just basically jammed through it. None of us had started a company before, and it was FIO, figure it out, on every single thing as we went through the company and put it together.
All right. So before we jump more into Packeteer, right now you're CEO of Pertino. What does that company actually do?
Well, at Packeteer...
I mean a non-technical answer, because
let's
there's some people here.
Well, the inter-packet arrival time. No. Okay. So basically, if you think about it, if you're a small business and you need to build a network, you have to buy a bunch of stuff. You have to buy a firewall, you have to buy a VPN box, you have to buy all sorts of things to run a really professional network. If you're an IT guy and you want to make sure the thing is secure and really runs and is optimized properly, you buy a bunch of boxes. Like Packeteer, like we used to sell, right? We used to sell boxes to these guys to do all these cool packet tricks. And what we decided is we don't need to do that in boxes anymore, we can do it in the cloud. So we basically do networks as a service. So instead of buying all those crazy Cisco boxes most people buy, we can do it all in the cloud. And so that's the business that we started a couple years ago.
Okay. So why are you in Kelowna?
Kelowna?
Aren't you based in Silicon Valley?
If you remember, back at Packeteer, what year was it, 2000? In 2000, we just done an IPO. We're worth $1 billion or $2 billion. Had a pretty good run in the IPO, and we acquired a company called Workfire here in Kelowna. And so that was my first trip to Kelowna, was meeting a bunch of the guys that are here to acquire that company and bring that into Packeteer. And so then we ultimately had, how many people do we have here, 20, 30, 20, 40? I don't know. We had a pretty big office here, a development center. We had really good luck. We were very excited about it. That we built, we took not only the product that the Workfire guys did and repackaged it and sold it as a Packeteer product, but we also had a whole series of other things that came out of this. We just had phenomenal success in building an R&D center in Kelowna. So I took some time off, came back, we started Pertino back up, and we started calling up our old buddies from Packeteer and say, Kelowna guys, hey, do you want to fire up a little remote office up here again, much like we did last time? So we're just doing that and getting started.
Okay. Had you even ever heard of Kelowna before you've heard of this company?
No. Interestingly enough, though, when we took the proposal to the board of directors about, to say we wanted to buy this company in Kelowna and we had all the stuff worked out, one of my investors, a venture capital guy, a very successful venture capital guy, he goes, I was just golfing there last week. And he'd literally been to Kelowna the week before when we presented it. So I think that was part of the momentum that got everybody to go, all right, we'll spend the $100 million or whatever we spent to buy the company. So.
All right.
So shortly after that was, well, I guess, I might have come up once before, but shortly after that we came up to do the signing and celebrate the acquisition of Workfire. 2000 was the first time I came to Kelowna, approximately.
Okay. So this is, I have a couple of fun questions in here.
Uh-oh.
This is not business related. One of your coworkers in California asked me to ask you about children's books.
Oh.
Apparently you've written children's books?
Well, that has nothing to do with, I thought you were heading in a whole different direction. So anyway, that's nice and safe.
Maybe we should go there too.
We can talk about that. No problem. So, no, I one of the things I kind of always done on the side is write books. So not only children's books, I wrote Introduction to Computer Science, which is the Introduction to Computer Science for Stanford, the textbook. And then about 150 universities picked that up. So a buddy of mine and I wrote that. And then we wrote 2 books on home automation technology way back when on power line carrier systems. So those are just kind of weird little interest things that we did and wrote books. And then the last ones I did, I have 2 boys, they're 13 and 15 now. And when they were little, like 2 and 4, you go to read books to your kids every night, right? It's a good parent thing to do. And I was reading books, and it was always like the happy giraffe dances through the daisies. My boys are going, oh, God, Dad, where's the fishing and hunting and shooting things and boy stuff? We want race cars and that kind of stuff. And I tried to look to find boy books to get them really excited about reading, right? And there's just nothing. It was lame. And the boys like race cars. I like race cars. I got some race cars. And there was nothing there. And so I just, being an entrepreneur, I just called NASCAR. You got no books. You need books. That's the next generation of your fans. And you got nothing. They went, okay, let's do a deal. You can write some books. And I was like, oh, crap, now I got to write the books. But so I did that. And they're called Racer Buddies. And they're meant for kind of kids 3 through 7. And they're kind of, it's sort of like, well, in fact, they were done before the movie Cars, but they're kind of like that, the car characters. So they're meant for little kids, but they're technically accurate. So I went to Daytona and measured the angles of the track and really did all the work to make it technically accurate. So the kids were really learning about racing. And then there's words in there that are like red that has a glossary so you can learn about all the racing stuff. And then we did it about Daytona, and we did one about Richmond, and we had a bunch more, and I haven't got those done yet because I got this other company thing going on. But so that was the kids' book. So to get more boys reading stuff. So, and it's on Amazon. Oh, sorry.
All right. So moving into your sort of startup world, what do you take, what experience do you take from a big company like Apple into the startup world?
Well, I think, Apple, although a big company, was 4,000 people. I just went to the reunion, the first 10 years of Apple, the employees who were there in the first 10 years of the company. The company's now, almost 30-some years old, 40 years old. It's almost 40 years old. So it's kind of fun. But at that point in time, I think it was everybody says this about their big companies, had a very entrepreneurial culture, but it kind of did. And there was 4,000 employees there when I started. There's 95,000 there now. So big change. But I learned just a lot about fundamental business practices and stuff, and I hadn't really done much from an accounting standpoint, so I had to manage budgets and all of those pieces. So all of those little pieces, I think when you're an entrepreneur, you take all sorts of experience, whether that's large company experience or just other things that you've done, and pull all of those bits and pieces together into a collection that is really the experience set that you use to start a company. It's, as I tell the guys every day, it's FIO, figure it out. That's the answer to 90% of the questions I get. What do we do about health insurance? Figure it out. Here's the yellow pages. Go, Google, figure it out. And you just make stuff happen. And that's the difference between, real entrepreneurs and people who belong in a big company in a cube doing what they're assigned all day. That's the big difference. It's all about FIO. Just got to figure it out.
All right. So, as a CEO talking to a CEO, what sort of skills do you sort of think are the most important?
I think number one is tenacity. I answered that. Somebody asked me that similar question the other day. And, you can talk about financial skills and all these different things and communications and people skills, but at the end of the day, it's tenacity, because no matter what your idea or anything else, there will be days when you're sure that it's a disaster, it's not going to work, a big company comes in as a competitor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the difference between the successful and not successful entrepreneur is tenacity. I said that the other day. I said the difference is an entrepreneur, when presented with a brick wall, puts his head down and runs faster. That's the difference.
All right. Is that what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah.
Figuring it out. Back to your sort of Packeteer acquisition of Workfire.
Uh-huh.
What was it like coming in and being an acquirer? You hadn't done that before, if I'm reading your history correctly.
No, I hadn't, and it was interesting. It was, we had a very valuable. This was in the heydays of the internet, right? So we went out, and I think our maximum market cap was $2 billion. So if you look at it from a standpoint of capital allocation, you've got a very valuable currency in your stock. And so that's a time when you want to use that to build out the portfolio of products. So that was our real strategy when we saw WorkFire. We felt as an alignment in products. It was a great product that enhanced the performance of websites. We're all about performance enhancement in applications. So the Packeteer products really did at their heart. So we felt that our existing sales channel could be able to take those and be able to sell those, and it was a good alignment. I think the big thing, and we try to do this from a company standpoint, is transparency. And these guys would say whether I'm lying or not, but what I hope to try to do is to come up and just be as open as possible about the business and be able to explain the business and what we're doing, what we're attempting to do, and trying to use that as a method to get people to be engaged and incorporated and be part of Packeteer as quickly as possible. Some of the things that we did now, 20 years, 10, how many years? 15 years in hindsight, is we eliminated WorkFire off of it, and we made this Packeteer Canada right away. And so that everybody was engaged in the same thing. And I think that if you look back in the history of successful acquisitions, that's one of the things you got to do is get everybody on the same team. Bay Networks was a classic example when there was a big acquisition that they did, and they tried to run kind of two separate companies under one umbrella. Boom, Cisco killed them. So, I think that was the other piece that we did, is pull everybody together, one team, one logo, and get people going, and then just be transparent about the business. And we still do that today. In fact, when I get back next week, we do something for Pertino. These guys see it on a screen that we do is board reenactment. So we go out and do our board meetings for our VCs, and then as soon as possible, we do our pizza lunch or whatever. We bring all the employees of the company together, and we reenact the board meeting with the board slides and put it up on the table so everybody really understands how the company is working. The same stuff that I see, that I present to my board members, they see. So the goal being is they understand the workings of the company, and if everybody understands the workings of the company, they're more a part of the team, and they understand how the contributions that they're all making really kind of all come together to build the overall business plan. And to me, that's the most important thing in the world, is that aspect of transparency. My goal as CEO is that I hope that at the end, of everybody's career at Packeteer and now at Pertino, that they all know how to start their own business. We give a book out to, what's the book called? Venture Deals. We give a book to every new employee, Venture Deals. And it's all about how companies get capitalized. And it's written by a venture capital guy who actually talks about term sheets and all the details. And, people say I bore them to death, but I take everybody to lunch and I go through how we funded the company with every single person, QA, marketing people, the receptionist, everybody hears the Craig speech. This is how we funded it. This is the valuation. This is the terms we did, all of those different pieces, because, as I say in these board reenactments is, talking to my employees, you're all investors in the company with your time, energy, and your stock options. And you should understand it from an investor standpoint as well as a technical and marketing standpoint. So I think all of that comes together when you're doing an acquisition or just trying to, keep everybody together on the same team. You've got to do that.
All right. So how different was it being an acquirer versus you later went on to be acquired? How different was that?
Well, I was on the board and retired then, so it was easy. The acquisition, honestly, the acquisition we did when Packeteer was acquired, it was actually kind of interesting. We were run along, as a publicly traded company. I, decided to retire, move to New Zealand for a while, finally. I got to go to New Zealand. And, but I was still on the board of directors. But what happened to us was there was a company, believe it or not, called Elliott Management, no relation to me, which was an East Coast activist shareholder company, a hedge fund. And they came in and started to buy up shares of the stock. So this wasn't a friendly acquisition at all. It was actually a hostile acquisition. It wasn't a complete takeover, but they started to buy up shares of the stock and then insist on getting a board seat, and were writing letters to our biggest investors, and it was really pretty ugly. And so we at that point then decided that the best thing for the company was to try and put it together with another company we knew quite well, Blue Coat Security Company, who the previous year we'd actually tried to acquire, interestingly enough. And so it was a good fit. We knew the executives. We'd already gone through the process of us acquiring them. And we flipped it around and said, to Brian Nesmith, the CEO, said, hey, let's still do this deal, but you be the acquirer, and that way we could get these nasty East Coast guys off our backs. So that was kind of an odd one. But and I wasn't involved directly from a management side. So.
Okay. And I guess I'll ask you some more questions on the acquisition as opposed to the being acquired.
Okay.
Wasn't so active role, hey? When you went to acquire Workfire here in Kelowna, I mean, were you looking for a company to acquire? Were you looking for certain growth rates? What were the criteria involved?
I think product alignment was one of the big things, because one of the challenges I see with companies when they do acquisitions, if they aren't aligned with their existing product, I mean, they can be 5 or 10 degrees off, but it can't be 90 degrees off. And acquiring a company just for a growth rate, whether in a dissimilar market, is the kiss of death. It just doesn't ever work out, I don't believe. So we saw with Workfire, we had a great alignment with the way that we were going to market, with our existing message, our brand, everything that we were trying to accomplish around application performance. It was a great alignment. And when we saw that, we'd actually probably looked at 100 companies, and we just couldn't find that really good alignment. And this was one that we felt was a great synergy between the two companies.
How do you feel about this culture that I read about and sort of see sometimes, this sort of like culture of CEOs who build companies to get acquired versus build companies to build companies?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's only in the rarest occasions. I've seen guys that have done it successfully, particularly guys that'll be like in a big company like a Cisco, networking guys, right? Cisco, they'll see a gap in the product line, and they'll roll out to try and just build something quickly to fill the gap. And sometimes that works. But besides that, the only thing I think you can do is build a company to be successful. And if you build it to grow fast, take MTO, maximize the opportunity, and grow quickly, good things will happen. And the good things could be a lot of stuff. It could be IPO, could theoretically be an acquisition, but I just don't believe in building companies for acquisition. I just don't think that you can really do that and do that successfully. You can be acquired, but rarely do people sell companies. People get bought, and they get bought because they're successful and growing, and their customers are happy, and all the same things you do to build a big successful company. So do that, and good things will happen, and the good things could be a variety of different outcomes.
All right. I mean, do you have any advice for a CEO who is really just here growing quite well, like considering acquisition? Do you just tell them to stop looking around and keep going, or?
No, I mean, you can always make sure that that people are aware of you, right? So that's part of it. And so you can make sure that you take the meeting with the investment banker just to let them know about your business. And you can even have, be at the conferences, and you can do other stuff so that people are aware of your company and aware of you generally. But beyond that, I, again, don't think companies get sold, they get bought. And so you can make people aware of you and then be really successful. And then that's when they come and do the acquisitions. Unless you've got a sliver technology that that you see a gap and you're trying to just fill the gap.
All right. So after your sort of exit, you headed to New Zealand. Why?
Because there's big brown trout there.
Big brown trout?
Big brown trout. Oh, yeah.
All right.
No, we've been to New Zealand on holiday. I took my wife there on our honeymoon. It's a beautiful place. And so in California, everybody goes to Hawaii, and I don't like to do what everybody else does. So we went to New Zealand instead. And so we went back and forth there for a while, and then we moved down there and put the kids in school. And the boys taught them how to play rugby, chuck their baseball gloves and start playing rugby. Yeah, knocking heads with the Kiwi boys, and it was a lot of fun. And so just exploring places. I like to explore new and different places. And the thing I really like about New Zealand is it's exotic enough to be extremely interesting and a lot of fun, but the language is pretty close to being English. And so you can, so it's the kids could go to regular school. I had another friend, a Cisco friend, who at the same time took some time off. He went to Italy, and then his kids went to American school in Italy. It's like, well, okay. They didn't get that real integration. So we bought a house down there, and we go there, still go there all the time. I'm on the board of Kiwi Landing Pad. I'm on the board of Xero, a publicly traded company in New Zealand. We spend a lot of time going back and forth to New Zealand. It's a cool place. Big brown trout.
So I hear you're winning an award in New Zealand.
It's top secret for another week. So.
Okay, are you allowed to say anything?
Yeah, in Kelowna I can. Don't tell anybody, but it's kind of interesting. We've done a lot of stuff. We did this Kiwi Landing Pad.
Careful a little bit.
What's that?
This is streamed live. So.
Oh God! All right.
Yeah.
So
if the Kiwis are watching.
We've done a few different projects. A Kiwi Landing Pad, a New Zealand entrepreneur and I basically just wrote checks and fired up this. It's not really an incubator, but it's a place where New Zealanders who have marginally successful companies, reasonably successful companies within their own country. There's only 4 million people in New Zealand. It's a small market. But if they want to start to look to expand in the United States, this is a place they can go, much like an incubator, and go for 3 or 6 or however many months that they need to start to explore the U.S. market, to go from a market of 4 million people to 300 and some million people. So we did that in San Francisco. We built that. We just got done doing, I said I'm on the board of Xero, publicly traded company in New Zealand. You ever seen this? XERO. It's cloud-based accounting. Killer stuff. They're going to eat QuickBooks for lunch, or it's just amazing. The market cap, they're traded in Australia and New Zealand. The market cap in the last 2 years has gone from $300 million to just short of $5 billion. They're on fire. So that's been a lot of fun, trying to help them integrate back into Silicon Valley, and they're going to take over the U.S. market, so I've been playing that with them. And then we did another cool thing, which was, we call it Winterns. We love to do summer intern programs in Silicon Valley, and Pertina, we love doing summer interns, right? Grab college kids, bring them in, and get them cool projects to work on, and it's hugely helpful for us. But there's only one summer per year. It's only 3 months long. So what did we do? Found another summer. Southern Hemisphere, December, January, February. So we went down and got students from Victoria University and University of Auckland, ComSci students, flew them up, found them a place to live, and had them work at Pertino. So they got a Silicon Valley experience for a few months. So somebody heard about all this nonsense we're doing with New Zealand, and they picked 5 people every year, which is World Class New Zealander Award. And although I'm not a New Zealander, I got it this year. So I go down in a week to get that. So it's kind of cool.
Awesome. So have you
I'll
started?
start talking funny pretty soon.
Have you started that in Canada yet?
What's that?
Hiring Canadians
Yeah, right there.
for the summer, taking them to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, but our summer's the same.
All right.
You got to come up with a new summer for them. See, that was the thing. We call it winterns, winter interns. So, but we could, we like doing internships. So, we think it's very valuable. If you properly define the project, extremely valuable. If you just kind of toss them in and see what happens, it will never work. So,
Cool. So what brought you back from New Zealand? How did that turn out?
yeah, I kind of screwed up my holiday. One of our really sharp engineers, Scott Hankins, who had been involved in building packet shapers, which were these appliances, these devices that we'd put out in the right spot in the network to do cool packet tricks. He was really tired of being confined to the box. Much like your computer on your desk, every 3 or 4 years, it's like, okay, it's getting slow, and it's not enough RAM, the hard drive's too small, and everything. These network boxes were very similar. And so he said, why can't we do some of these cool packet tricks that we do and do them in the cloud, where we have elastic compute, and I can just change the amount of performance that I apply to any one of the problems just like that, and spin it up and spin it down. And so he basically locked himself in his apartment, as Scott tends to do, and for 6 months and just figured it out about how to build networks using cloud-based resources as opposed to appliances. And so as one of the things, if you ever work for me, is you've got lifetime consulting agreement on any company you want to start. So he called me up just to say, what do I do? I think this is cool, and help me write the business plan. So, all right, so I helped him write the business plan. He says, introduce me to some investors or some people. We got to get this thing figured out. And I took a look at it, and it had two criteria for me. One is it's technically disruptive, which makes it interesting to really do cool stuff. And the second is it's economically disruptive. And the price that we can deliver these network services is an order of magnitude less than anybody else. And so when I saw those two things, I kind of went, maybe we ought to give this a go. And so that's when Scott and I decided that we would spin this up, and that's when we started it, 2 years and change ago.
So what like went through your head when, and your family's heads when you were deciding to do another startup? That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, well, there's one CEO in my house, and she's blonde. So it was probably good to get me out of the house a little bit. So I had a lot of fun. I mean, we spent 7 years traveling the world, goofing off, doing fun stuff. So, I've also got 3 kids. I got a 9-year-old daughter, 13-year-old boy, and a 15-year-old boy. And I kind of wanted to see them. They were sort of growing up in a nice house, driving fancy cars, and watching Dad goof off every day. And I didn't feel so good about that either. So it seemed like time to go back to work and, show them that it's effort that gets you those cool things. Because they were little when Packeteer happened. I mean, they were 2- and 4-year-old boys. They don't remember any of it. So anyway, so I thought that was also a good time just from a kid's standpoint to be involved and really show them. So it was a good decision.
All right. So how long did it take you to get your first customer?
First customer, let's see. We probably did a solid year worth of R&D before we had any of the beta customers up. It's a big, complicated project to make run. We've got customers now in. I looked before we came down. There were 70 countries that had networks spun up all around the world. A lot of them are still. We have this kind of free beta to allow people to try it so we can test the scalability. So I think there was 3,000 people spun up in 70 countries all around the world. So, we're still trying to get our arms around all the details, just starting to move people across the paywall now. So the paying customers are just coming in the last few months.
So you got your first paying customer in the last few months?
Absolutely.
How did that feel?
It's always good. Money is a good thing. Revenue solves all ills. That's another saying that every CEO should know.
So can you talk about the difference between finding customers or finding investors?
Well, interestingly enough, finding investors, the one thing to remember is, reputation counts for a lot in the investor community. So we made, Steve Campbell, who is one of our angel investors at Packeteer, gave us $200,000 and made $50 million. So he was a happy guy. So when you go and you call that guy back and say, Steve, I need a few $100,000 for another company, he's like, here you go.
Here you go.
So it wasn't hard making those second calls. And then NEA, New Enterprise Associates, one of the VCs, actually we ended up not using, but those guys, we use them as an example. They gave us, 4 million, 6, maybe $7 million, and I think they got 500. So those calls were pretty easy to make. So raising money is not a big deal for us. So.
Okay, fair enough.
We had $1 million in 3 weeks, and then we went back out in March, and another 4 weeks we had 10 million. And then the next a year after that, we still had half of that money in the bank, and we were getting hammered by the VCs, and we raised 20 million on 80. So that was having a successful company first is. That's what you need to raise money. All you need to do is a multi-billion-dollar IPO first, and then So anyway.
Simple.
So the second time it was easy. The first time it was a bit of a trick, but.
Okay. Can you talk about the challenges of pure startup mode versus your sort of different challenges as you actually start to scale? We've got several companies. Certainly, I'm being a little selfish here. We've got several companies on our programs now that are at that point where they're sort of into early stage revenues and looking to grow from founders to small teams to medium-sized, what we call medium-sized teams here.
I think one of the big things is focus. And that's the biggest challenge is trying to pick one thing and do it really well. I mean, most of the time, at least the ideas I've seen is like, you know, it's like, oh, we can do this and this customer and this customer and this customer, and it can really be a trick. And also since it's hard to know where to place those bets, that's the biggest challenge. But, you know, pick one thing and do it extremely well. And you can still talk to investors about other opportunities, but, you know, execute on something all the way to the finish line is critical, critical, critical. We struggle with this at Pertino all the time. We're building networks. So, okay, should we build firewalls first or VPNs or WAN optimization? We already know how to do that. What about, you know, and it's all these different options. But what we had to do is go, okay, we're going to do VPNs, and we're going to do it really well. And our first goal is rock solid connectivity on a global basis. And that's it. And stop talking about all the other stuff. That is the hardest thing early on, because you can sit and talk about all the options, or you can execute on one of them. And executing on one of them is, I think, what's really going to take you down the path, and that's what the VCs look for.
And so how does the focus shift when you're in startup mode versus sort of scaling mode?
Well, I still think, you know, focus is a big issue, but you have to also be able to take some level of resource and be able to do some experiments with alternative markets, because we never know exactly where it's going to hit. It was interesting, you know, people always look at, oh, Packeteria, this big success, but we were like cruising along like this, selling, just grinding out sales. It was so tough. And then all of a sudden we started to do some experiments with different markets, and we experimented in the university market, because all the kids were in the dorms downloading music and killing the performance of the network. And so when we found that one, it was like, whoop, and then we had this big uptick in sales. But we had to do those experiments. So part of the scale process is to spend a measured amount of resource experimenting in different markets to try and really see where the uptake is. And that gets to be a little bit of a trick. You know, it's always a balance. It's, you know, I was reading a book the other day, and CEO's job is a lot about capital allocation or resource allocation. And can you take just a little sliver over here and do some experiments to try and see if that your technology applies in different places. So you have to continuously do that and rebalance and be able to know, fail fast. You know, you've heard these stories, but it's really true, is if it's not working, cut it off, try something else, and be able to move.
So what sort of percent of your company are you playing with?
Scott. Scott, our CTO, who's, you know, a brilliant technologist and inventor, but, you know, he's not a guy that, you know, he would be the first one to say that. He's not going to run, what do we have, 30 engineers plus? And just managing all those engineers is not his gig. So we've got him off doing some experiments on really cool stuff. And Guy Riddle, another guy, you know, the crazy Bell Labs guy. So we have some people who specialize in doing crazy idea stuff and trying to run these things to ground. But so in our case, we've got basically 2 guys out of about 60 that are just working on those things full time, trying to figure it out. And if we start to see traction, then we start to move through the rest of the company and say, okay, sales and marketing, do you have some customers we can try this out on? How do we test? And to be able to see and then size the market to see if we want to put it in kind of in production as opposed to just testing.
Okay. So on the CEO side, on managing your team, the same sort of thing. As you scale, you start to need different skills. When you start, you're just trying to build product. And where do you learn from to be a CEO? Do you have advisors, mentors? How do you keep that sort of?
It's mostly the animal science stuff. I've decided that vice presidents and cattle, very similar in a lot of ways. So, I think, I've got like Steve Campbell, the guy that did the original investment in Packeteer, did the original investment in Pertino. He was the founder of Stratacom. He built that company and sold it to Cisco for $4 billion. Another investor in Pertino is Rob Ryan. He built a company called Ascend. He sold it to Lucent for $24 billion. I mean, if you pick the right angel investors, you should be able to get, a lot of advice from those kind of guys. But, it's surprising. The first time I met Rob Ryan, I was watching his company grow like crazy, and I don't know, maybe I just wasn't smart enough to be worried about it. I just picked up the phone and called him. Rob, my name's Craig Elliott. I'm trying to start a company. I'm dying here. Tell me what to do. He's like, okay. And that was it. I had a 2-hour phone call with him. Next was Howard Charney. He started big networking company, Grand Junction Networks. Just sold to Cisco for a ton of money. Howard, my name's Craig. Got to give me a call back. I'm dying here. Called me right back. They'll call you. I mean, that's back to your cold calling thing. CEOs got to do cold calling as well. Just call them up, see what they say. You'd be surprised how much people are willing to help. They like to help folks out. So I've never been shy about just calling folks up and see what's going on.
And so speaking to that, I mean, some CEOs like the product, some CEOs are more business focused. You're definitely on the business side as opposed to the technology side.
I always like to think that I'm the most technical sales and marketing guy.
Okay.
So couldn't cut it as an engineer by any means, but understand this stuff fairly well as a sales and marketing guy. So I always try to, and I think there's some interesting gaps that people can look at, and I think you could flip that around and say the most sales and marketing oriented engineer would be another interesting place to be a CEO. I think if you're 100% focused just on one discipline, it's going to be challenging in a growth company. You know, if you're 1,000 employees and a bunch of revenue, you might be able to pull that off. But in a company where you've got to kind of have your fingers in a lot of different things, that to me has always felt, if I've had any success, one of the reasons is to be happy to dive into the technology, but not to be a technologist, but to try and really understand it. So,
do you still make cold calls?
Absolutely.
Do you close business?
Absolutely. First packet shaper ever sold. We were at a trade show. This is a good story. So we were just in beta. We had our boxes, and we went to this little trade show where we just had a booth in, we didn't even have a booth. We couldn't afford a booth. So we had this like little hotel suite that we set up near where the trade show was. And we were like, come over here, guys. You know, really, no, this is part of the trade show. And we got people to come over, and this guy came in, and we told him the story, and we had a bunch of our cardboard boxes there that were kind of the beta boxes that some guy had sent us to see if the print was right, and we had some packet shapers set up. And this guy said, I love this idea. I need this. I want one. And everybody's like going, uh-oh, now what do we do? And he goes, and I'm flying back to South America tomorrow. And I said, well, and I jumped in. No problem, sir. We'd be glad to help you out. How would you like to pay for that? And he goes, a credit card. I said, no problem. I said, let me go take care of that for you. And I walked back in the closet. We didn't have a credit card machine. I just wrote it down and like took a rubbing of it and everything I could. Went back and said, well, thank you very much, stuff. And we boxed one up and sent him off. Everybody's looking at me like, we don't have a credit card thing. I said, well, we're going to have one by Monday, won't we? And so it's just, you know, I sent an email out today. We had a specific feature. No, there's an issue around pricing. We're trying to figure our pricing out still. You know, we don't know. How much do you charge for a cloud-based network? Well, no one's ever sold one before, so don't know. Figure it out, guys, right? So we have this customer. It's got 200 remote workers, and he wants to buy it, but he doesn't like the way our pricing is because each remote worker has 3 devices, so that's actually 600 devices, and our pricing, which is more targeted at kind of 100 users, looks really expensive when you have 600 devices on it. And so, but I get a response back, I won't say who, but they're like, well, we can't do it because the pricing's wrong. It's like, fix the pricing, guys, and change it and figure it out and just fix it. What's the problem, right? My tagline to this was, this guy wants to be closed. Call me tomorrow with the deal and make the deal up. Make the customer happy. Doesn't matter. Just figure it out. What's the, you know, this is a startup. What's the roadblock? Is there somebody else made some rules here that we got to follow? Screw it. Let's just do it. So you just got to keep hammering on people all the time because they, I don't know, people somehow naturally feel that they're constrained, but we made the pricing up a few weeks ago. We can make it up again. Who cares, right? And you know how we figure out how to price a packet shaper? So a packet shaper was this device, and our original one would manage a T1 line. It allowed you to look at all the traffic and basically go, that's YouTube. We're going to turn that down and slow it down. That's Oracle or SAP or something important. We'll turn that up and speed it up for voice over IP. Fundamentally what it did. And we're like, well, how do you price that? It's like, no one had ever built one before. We had 65 patents on that technology. So how do you price it? It's not cost plus, you know, and it's not a discount from the competition. It's just nothing. So the way we ended up pricing it, and I just made a call at the end, was most directors of IT have signature authority for $10,000. So we'll back out the tax and the service contract and make it $79.95, so they can just sign up for it without getting a vice president's approval. Okay, and that was it. And the funniest thing in the world was, you know, we kind of created, there was a whole bunch of competitors then, several years down the road. That pricing stuck, and we had competitors all around the world like, well, we're 10% less than Packeteer. It's like, I made that up. I just made it up on an airplane, you know, and so you just got to give it a go, right? You can't sit around and look at it.
Fair enough. So what are you doing differently on your second go-around at this?
Well, on the first go-around, there were things that happened like the venture capital guy calls up and says, well, what do you expect your pre-money valuation is? And I say, excuse me a second, put him on hold. What the hell's pre-money valuation? You know, stuff like that. We got that sorted now this time, so we kind of know all the details. I think we're a little bit more efficient. We know that there's some dead ends we don't have to go down. We can start to understand, you know, investment bankers will waste your time all day, and, you know, there's lots of VCs, if you can't figure out what their existing portfolio of products is, and it doesn't somewhat align to what you're doing, they're wasting your time, and just stuff. I think we're more efficient. That's the thing that feels like we're not, you know, just spending endless cycles for stuff that isn't moving the company forward. So I think we're able to move the company forward, you know, much more quickly, which is a good feeling. I mean, we like that.
All right. Your office here in Kelowna is growing. You guys are searching for people.
Always.
Always. When you're trying to bring people onto your team, how do you hire? What do you look for? I don't just mean here in Kelowna, but
I'd say, you know, sometimes people say, I'm the CEO, I'm going to interview every single person. I don't do that. I try to do is, I believe in making sure that everybody's got their own responsibility for their own organizations. So I am always available anytime to interview anybody that somebody wants me to interview or help close them. Fairly good sales guy, so, you know, I'm glad to do that. But one thing I always ask for, and I mentioned the word before, is tenacity. I mean, if you've got a guy, we were hiring sales guys the other day, right? And we're interviewing sales guys. And this was a good question somebody said is ask a sales guy what the sale he is most proud of. And one of the answers I got back, I always ask this question, what sales you're most proud of? Well, I got this really big deal. It was the biggest deal of the quarter, and this guy called, and we closed the deal, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you got a deal came across the fax machine, and you signed it. Big deal, right? And you talk to the next guy, the guy we hired, and the customer said no 10 times. You know, the 11th time, we fixed the pricing, and we changed the product, and we got it. That's the guy you want to hire. And I think that goes for engineering, marketing, anything through the organization. It's tenacity. Because you know what? There's a book that I just read called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, Andreessen Horowitz guy. Excellent book. And he's like going, you know, guys, don't kid yourself. If you want to do a startup, it is going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. And you're going to have days where you think the whole thing is going to like fall in your lap. And you got to just plow through it. And it's going to be hard. And if you're not willing to just have the tenacity to say, I don't care that this big shot told me we're dead, or this VC said I'm funding somebody else instead of you, or whatever horrible thing happens, if you're willing to roll over on that, you should find a different occupation. Because it's going to happen, and it's going to, you know, I mean, Brett and I were getting the credit cards out to do payroll for Packeteer. You guys didn't know that, did you? No, that was actually pre-IPO, but it was like, you know, that we had a VC, we had a term sheet signed, it was all ready to go, and I stupid Craig, never do this again, called back the other VCs that we were negotiating with and said, the deal's done, you're out, sorry. VC pulled the term sheet on me. Now I'm dead, and the money's going like this. I'm like, oh, God, on our B round. And we were like, okay, how do we make payroll? What do we do? I mean, it was horrible. And we found it, we got the deal, and we twisted stuff around and made it happen. But stuff like that's going to happen. And again, if you don't want to play that game, you got to find something else to do. And that book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, is kind of about that. It's tough. It's really hard. Huge upside, and it's fun. And if you like that and you're willing to take those risks, there's nothing better in the world you could do, but don't expect it to be a cakewalk. It's tough.
I thought being a startup CEO was sexy.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm in Silicon Valley. Everybody's a startup CEO. It's like they're thicker than thieves, yeah. So.
So what sale are you most proud of?
What sale am I most proud of? That one that got me the Porsche, probably. That's a story that I have stretched many, many times. So, let's see. I don't know. I think taking the credit card in the bathroom and writing the numbers down and figuring it out, that was about as good as it gets, because I think it set a little bit of the tone and culture for the rest of the guys in the company too. It's like, just figure it out. It doesn't matter. I don't have a credit card machine. Well, is that a problem? Figure it out. And I think we were able to parlay that, quite a ways down the path in starting the company. So that was a good one. That was a lot of fun.
So one of my first sales ever, I started out at Xerox. My very first sale at Xerox, my boss bought me a Nintendo Wii for closing my first deal.
Really?
And the deal I closed was about $1,500, the smallest possible machine on our price list.
Right.
And I'm sure his commission on it would have been about $75. So he lost money on the deal just buying me a Nintendo Wii.
It's pretty good.
So as a CEO, what keeps you up at night?
Children. Yeah, they're getting big enough now where it started to go from the crying keeping you up to, is he home yet? So it goes as, there's like only about 15 minutes in the middle where you can relax. So, no, I think, are we maximizing the opportunity? I mean, the thing about, it's the stuff that we're working on right now is broadly applicable technology. And that is a blessing and a nightmare. And so that's the thing that's just, always keeps me up is, are we, MTO, these are my little, you guys probably got the thing is like FIO, MTO, of all these like 3-letter acronyms I use for everybody to shorten it up. My kids hear it all the time, but maximize the opportunity. Are we maximizing the opportunity? We have raw invention that's never been done before. How do we apply it to the market to maximize the opportunity? So that's the thing that just is like, I'm just thinking about all the time just to make sure, and we're placing, a few little side bets, to test some different utilization of the technology. We're pretty sure we've got the broad market covered where it's, but you just don't know. You just got to keep trying and plowing ahead. So that's the thing that I'm always just constantly thinking about is, are we maximizing the opportunity?
All right. Can you share with us, I guess, any other really memorable moments along your sort of startup journey?
Oh, we got a lot of them. So, there's several that are slightly inappropriate. So I'm trying to think which ones we could do. All right, my chief technical officer at Packeteer, which you gentlemen remember, Bob Packer. Brilliant guy, degree in philosophy from Swarthmore, never took a computer science class, figured it out. He was the CTO and the inventor of all this rate-shaping technology that had never been done before. It was a crazy smart guy. 1,600 on his SATs, perfect score. I mean, just crazy smart. His social skills were zero, just absolutely zero. So but yet, I had to bring him to the venture capital meetings, right? Because he's the guy, and I can do the sales marketing bit, I can sell the story, everything else, but they want that technical guy sitting in the seat who can answer the questions, and really show them that we know what we're talking about and that we can execute. So I got Packer there, and it's just like, I'm just going. That's a place that really kept me up at night. How am I going to keep this guy under control? He was a complete whack job. So we're in front of a bunch of venture capital guys, and we're talking about network performance and TCP/IP, the protocol of the internet, and how it's best effort. It was really meant for like DARPA and all this junk that everybody's heard a million stories about, right? As always, if Kansas City blows up, the network still works, and that was the real way that protocol was built. And so then, as we use the protocol for new and different things like voice over IP or video or anything else, it's really not meant for that. And so that was part of my pitch. So Bob interrupts me in the middle of this big deal. This isn't just a VC meeting. This is the partner meeting with all the VC partners there, the deal that I'm sure we're going to close. He goes, now let me explain it to you. He goes, when you're downloading porn and it comes like down halfway and then it kind of stops, and that's really annoying. Well, we can fix that. And I'm like, oh, God. So stuff like that. I got at dinner, I'll tell you other ones that were take that times like 10 at AT&T headquarters with 50 people in an auditorium that was like, oh my God. So anyway, trying to manage Bob, that was probably about 50% of my job right there. So I used to literally have him sit beside me and wear shoes with a sharp heel, and I would just rake his shins like when he starts to shut up, Bob, just shut up. So anyway.
All right. So you're still working on this startup, but are you going to do another one?
You're kidding me. No. The thing is in the gap, we took about 6 or 7 years off, I think, after Packeteer and before we started Pertino. And the thing that was really fun is doing a lot of stuff like the New Zealand stuff. And my wife and I, we invested in a bunch of companies, and that's probably what we're going to do. So I would like to get back to this whole getting up in the morning and having to go in the office every day is kind of annoying. So I like to do being able to do some more investing and help guys get companies started and participate in different ways. But I ain't doing another one. That's enough.
Well, we've got some good ones here that
there you go.
You could come and you can have a desk at our office anytime.
No worries. So startups are, I've got a lot of friends that have like gone back to Apple and stuff, and I wouldn't consider that in a billion years. But there's so many cool things going on from a startup standpoint, and when you see stuff that those are my two criteria: is technically disruptive and economically disruptive. If you have something that does both of those things, then it's just up to execution at that point. I mean, can you deliver? And that's the fun ones. When you see that, it's with a team that can deliver. It's a lot of fun. Very exciting.
Cool. Part of our startup community is definitely about supporting each other. We're a very collaborative community here, I think, compared to many startup communities. So I guess one thing I'd ask of you is, like, what does your company need help with right now? Maybe somebody here has a connection or something like that for you.
Well, that's interesting. Who's got a really good technical connection high up in Amazon or Azure or Rackspace or any of the cloud providers? Don't know them, but maybe. So anybody who's basically building, for companies to be able to spin up servers, VMs and servers, and to be able to do that, because part of what we can do with our technology is I've got a contact, the CTO at Rackspace. We did a demo from the other day. So this was kind of cool is, we build networks in the cloud, right? And so one of the challenges people have is like Rackspace, if you spin up servers in their data centers to connect those servers together and then to connect the servers down to your company or even to your laptop, spinning up the servers is easy. I can do that. I mean, that fast, really cool. But then you want to build a network, spin up a VM, create a Viata virtual network, use the command line it's like crazy hard. So we were at the CTO of Rackspace the other day, and he called up, he's heard about our stuff, and we're doing a demonstration, and I said to him, I was going to bring a whole bunch of PowerPoint slides and bore you to death, but screw that, we're going to do a demo, a thought-provoking demo to see what you think. And I said, can you, Mr. CTO of Rackspace, explain to me what it takes to build a network between all of the servers within your infrastructure, within, you've got data centers in Japan and all over the place to do that. And so we said, and while he's doing that, we have up on the screen all of his data centers. He goes, well, much like I said, first you spin up the servers, so we have them all up there. And he goes, the next thing you need to do is spin up a VM with Viata, and the command, you take the IP address, and we had them all spun up and all connected in a 50 dot network, that fast. And Scott had it done before he finished his sentence about what you would have to do to connect them. We had them connected. But we can do that in any environment in the cloud, be it Microsoft's environment, Google's environment, or anything else. So this is this is the Scott project that he's working on right now to see. But what we really need to be able to do, we have the Rackspace guy, but we need some of these other Azure, the Google guys, the big guys that we can go in and do some demonstrations to the right guy. Technically savvy marketing guys or PMs at a high level within these organizations. So if anybody knows or has contacts around that, let me know, because I think we've got another killer app using this stuff to be able to connect. And once again, and the thing that's interesting about this is I could say that, I thought this up, just while I was goofing around. But actually what happened is a customer brought it to us, as usual. The customer said I'm always calling the customers, like, what are you doing with our stuff? What's going on? Say you're the CEO, they love it. And I just call the people up and say, what's going on? What are you doing with our network? Does it work for you? Does it not work for you? And this guy goes, you know what I did? And I said, what? He goes, I built a command and control network. And that's where this came from. He goes, I had all these servers. I'm supposed to manage them. I'm the IT guy. It was driving me crazy. I have to log on to one and log on to the next one. He goes, I use Pertino. I just built a network of all of them. I have my laptop, wherever I am, home, Starbucks, work, doesn't matter. I say click, and I've got all those servers just lined right up there on my desktop, and I can, do whatever I need to do to manage those servers. And that's when I went, I have a great idea, Scott. So customers teach you 90% of the good stuff. The whole university stuff I talked about with Packeteer, that was all out of Stanford. Stanford guys called us up. Did you know that 70% of our traffic was downloaded music? And we went and used your stuff to turn the knob down so it didn't work anymore? Like, oh, how many universities are there? Oh. So we called a few other ones, and they all said, big problem. University special program. Boom. That's what it was. But listen to the customers. They usually know what they're doing. So.
All right, last question before we open it up. Actually two. Sorry, I almost forgot one of those other weird ones. So Presley told me to ask you about race cars.
Uh-oh.
Somehow they have a tie-in to your children's stories too.
Oh.
Do you drive race cars?
Badly. So that was another thing we did in the retirement phase. We bought a 1970 Chevron B16. It's a Le Mans car. So we got that, and we got a bunch of stuff, a bunch of muscle cars and Porsche turbos and all sorts of stuff. But my boy is 15, so we're selling all of them right now before he turns 16.
All right, so really last question, and we'll open it up. What are you most proud of so far?
Most proud of? I don't know. We have retired a lot of mortgages for employees. That's pretty cool. I don't know. I think just having a whole group of people that, just had a lot of success. It's fun having a bunch of people wanting to come back and do another gig. It's kind of makes you proud. Mm-hmm. So that's fun.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No worries.
All right, we'll open it up now.
Uh-oh.
Bree, do you have a mic over there? Yeah.
Two questions. One, how did you sell all those Macintoshes? And two, where do you see your sons carrying on the family business for networking?
Well, the Macintoshes is really interesting. If you remember, probably most of you don't, Macintosh came out with like 5 programs that were sort of the example programs. And everybody thinks about MacWrite, MacPaint, right? They're kind of the cool programs. But there was another program called Mac Project, which was a graphical project management, Gantt chart, PERT charts, and a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And it was, it was way before, there's Project for Windows. There's a million of them now that had never been seen before. And so I just took that program and learned the daylights out of it. And I went to architecture, construction, engineering firms and sold it almost as a single-purpose computer with a bunch of other stuff. Because at that time, it couldn't compete, with PCs and everything else. It had a million different programs. It was this weird graphical thing. So I sold it kind of as that single-purpose computer. We had Winnebago. Everybody was buying them like crazy for project management. And then we used land and expand strategy to go in and, sell other stuff as we went down the road. But that was it. It's just I was really good at one thing, and focus was the big deal. So that was the trick. And let's see. And the other piece, my boys, they're 13 and 15 right now. They know football and girls. So we'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they head. I don't really know. At this point, oddly enough, I was always a computer guy. I have Apple II number 4028 from 1978. Wozniak and Jobs signed my book. I mean, it's, that's where I would have been a computer guy. I had wires hanging out, and I mean, so they don't do that. And I just bought my daughter, she's my hope. I just bought her a little computer construction kit that she and I are going to build together and stuff. But it'll be interesting to see if they come around and really want to dive into it, or if they're just sick of it from me being the computer geek all the time. I mean, again, for being a sales marketing guy, we have a log cabin up in Northern California, and it's like wired with, we've got moisture sensors, and, I've got magnetic sensors in the driveway that all feed back to Wi-Fi that, send me email, and cameras, and I just love all the geeky technology stuff. So we'll see if they actually jump on that, or they're just tired of hearing about it. So.
You mentioned that acquisition to get some activist hedge fund guys off your back. Was that what is referred to as a poison pill acquisition to saddle the company with debt?
Well, the poison pill part is we actually had a poison pill was written into our shareholder rights agreement, which was supposed to keep those guys off our backs, meaning that they couldn't use that acquisition strategy to come in and really, I guess from a legal standpoint, really come after us. But, those guys were like going around all of what I would say is good business convention. I mean, they're standing in my driveway harassing my wife. I mean, it was pretty ugly. So, and they were sending out press releases about, personal stuff, and it was just, incessant. And so it literally got down to the point where, we just looked at it and went, we're going to have to go through this for a year or more, to get them off our backs. And based on the options that we had for shareholders, they were sending out press releases saying that we're losing business. And I mean, they were trying to drive the stock price down so they could buy more, right? It was at the point I would call unethical, if not illegal. But what do you do? I mean, it's really challenging. The SEC's got no teeth at all. It's ridiculous. So they're actually, if you look right now, they're the same guys going after Riverbed and Juniper. They're doing the same thing. And the really interesting thing is, so we sold to Blue Coat. We combined the two companies, say, okay, we're done. They took Blue Coat out right after that. Felt bad. Kind of stiffed Brian Nesmith, and they had to sell to private equity. And they took from a publicly traded company to, they got taken out. And then they've taken the same strategy for, Juniper's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're doing the same thing to them. Scott Kren's the ex-CEO, now chairman of the board. I talked to him the other day, and he's like, what do I do? And they're having to sell off divisions to try and raise cash to, buy stock back and do all sorts of unnatural acts to try and get these guys off their backs. So it's I don't know. It's on the verge of unethical, illegal. But the poison pill part is the part that we actually had in place to try and make it very difficult for them to do this. But by dodging what we thought were the laws and ethics, they could do it anyway.
Anyone else out there?
Craig, if you were like, hi, Craig. If what really turns your crank is technically and economically disruptive enterprise, if you could choose one of the three, which one would you prefer to work with? Energy, finance, or healthcare?
Energy. Yep.
Wrong answer. Should have said all three. But either which way, yeah, you should talk to me after.
It's about focus, right? So I've got.
That's what Andrew told me.
I got an electric car now, and I'll tell you, there are going to be some crazy stuff going on around energy and changes in the way that we do some of the historical things. So, yep. It is a Tesla PD5 Plus, and it is faster than anything I've ever driven. It's crazy fast. I got a Porsche Turbo and a Tesla. The Tesla will hold 5 passengers and kill it. It's crazy fast.
There's a few Tesla lovers in town.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So, So if you get a chance to come to Silicon Valley, skip like going to Apple and all that stuff. Go to the Tesla factory. It's nuts. I went to pick up the car, and I took the kids, the boys, and my 13-year-old. It was the best line of the day. He goes, because we're in there, and there's these giant robots and sparks flying and welders. It's just crazy. And he goes, Dad, this is better than Transformers.
All right. Anyone else before we close it off? Oh, there's a few here.
Yep.
Over here.
The question came up earlier of how you hire. How would you make the case to someone very bright, might be entering their professional career, to come and work for a startup when so much of the technical culture seems to want to push them towards Apple or Amazon or Google or a lot of the behemoths?
Do you want to change the world or sell soda water or sugared water to kids? The Steve Jobs line. I mean, some variation of that is, you can go plug yourself into a cube of Facebook and have 20 lines of code to dink around with that might show up on the screen someday, or you can be here among 50 people doing something, truly inventive, where what you do today is going to show up. It's going to have a real impact. And that's what's fun about a startup, is having some impact. You can always find some, some weasel, some job for another $5,000 a year, something. It's Silicon Valley. There's lots of opportunities out there, but you want to do something that's cool, that you're proud of. That's what it comes down to. So, to me, if a person can't answer that question, that's what I want to do. See ya.
A couple over here, Bree.
Hey, Craig, first, thanks for picking Kelowna for location of Pertino. That's awesome. Love it. And I think one of the areas that is ready for disruption is really education process. Obviously, you've hired a lot of people in your time, and a lot of them probably haven't had formal educations. What do you think universities and colleges can do to get graduates more ready for work in the tech career as opposed to the traditional process now?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm a big internship fan, so I see people come out of college. I mean, so this last batch of interns that we had, I took them all to lunch before they were getting ready to, in this case, fly home, but to New Zealand. But the ones before that, they were just scattered around the U.S. And I talked to them about what's different. They go, the stuff we learn in class is it's not applicable. I mean, I just don't understand how it just seems to me that we've got a series of classroom experiences that really aren't getting people ready to really work in high tech. These guys are like, I had the one guy say that, he's a senior in computer science. He goes, I learned nothing until I had 3 months working with you guys. He goes, it's completely different than anything I learned. So I don't know, maybe we need to get more people from industry to be teaching or something to start to mix it up to align better the skill sets that are coming out than what we get right now. Because it's just, I don't know, you take a couple C++ classes at university and it just isn't what we do. Right. So, people need to know about GitHub. They need to know, they need all of these different technologies that are there. And I talked to the professors. I've got meetings tomorrow with professors here to try and see if we can shake some stuff up a little bit. It's not applicable. So we got to get that fixed. I mean, people are spending a lot of money and a lot of time going to 4 years of school or more. And, what are we getting out of it? I got my kids. My third grader right now is learning cursive. Give me a break. When's the last time anybody wrote anything in cursive? I called the superintendent of the school. I was like, coming unglued. How about a keyboarding class? Skip the cursive. Come on, this is, well, without getting on a big soapbox, but these are academics, not people that actually do anything. I mean, they teach, don't get me wrong, it's all good, but it's not relevant. Cursive. My third grader's learning cursive. So anyway, that's what we've got to do. Make it practical.
Make it practical, yeah.
She'll bring it.
Hello, my name is Nazim. We started production of interactive applications for kids with game elements and animation. And we're looking for interesting stories. And you mentioned that you are a writer. So are you interested to build applications out of your book?
Oh, that'd actually be kind of cool. Sure. Yeah, we'll do that. No worries.
Okay. Do you have copyrights?
What's that?
Do you have copyright?
All of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, I just did a license deal with NASCAR, but besides that, that would be the only piece is if you want the NASCAR logo on it, we got to work with those guys, and they're a little nefarious, but.
Okay, I will give you my business card.
No, that's actually interesting. I say that because it's obviously it's race cars, so there's a lot of action and stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. Yes. Oh.
You mentioned your love for interns. As a company, do you guys actually pay interns? And how do you feel about companies that don't pay interns and how that all fits into people's career options?
Yeah, we pay them. So we pay them pretty well. I think I'll tell you. I think they were like the New Zealand ones. Just as an example, we flew them over and flew them back. Economy, obviously, but gave them one trip over, one trip back. They paid for all their housing and food and everything else. A buddy of mine gave us a really crappy car that we gave him. And just randomly, I was just kind of like going, what do you do about cars? It's really hard because, they're under 25, and in the States, you can't rent a car if you're under 25. So we were like, thought that was going to be a deal breaker. And then I found this guy that had this junk Mazda that he was going to get a tax write-off for, and we got that and gave it to him. So that worked out. But just little pieces. And we paid him like $2,000 a month. Silicon Valley, $1,300 of that goes for housing. So it's not. We're not paying them. They're not putting serious cash in their pockets, at the end, but we're at least subsidizing the experience. And they were able to live pretty nice and have fun and do their thing. But that's what we do roughly.
How old were you when you first became a CEO with Packeteer, I guess?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That's not my question.
I'm
That was
only
to
34 now, so it must have
34.
been, no. Let's see. We started in 95, so I would have been 33.
So if you could
34.
So if you could go back now and talk to 33-year-old Craig Elliott,
Yep.
what would you say to him?
That's a good question. Let's see. The only thing I would say is do less better. Do less better. Focus. We, ran down a lot of rat holes and everything else, and we had a product, the package shaper, which early on we had service providers buying the product, so they would be able to adjust the bandwidth that they're selling to their customers, and we had customers buying the product so they could adjust the bandwidth that they're using, and it was like 50-50 our sales, and it was driving us crazy, and we spent a lot of time, energy, and money kind of doing both for a long time, and finally I went, screw it. Enterprise only, service providers, too bad for a while, until we could build the company up bigger. And once we did that and we focused on one set of customers, those customers were happier, they bought more stuff, we started to ramp. And then we actually had the money to go and fund the other thing, but trying to do two things at once, it was like, so just do fewer things really well. That would be what I would do. That's a mistake I wish we hadn't made.
All right. Well, I think we'll close it off there. Craig, thanks very much for joining us.
No worries.
Please keep growing your office in Kelowna.
Fast as we can.
We'll do our best to help you out. But yeah, Craig's going to stick around here for a while before we head off to dinner. So feel free to come up and talk to him. Thanks very much for coming out.